That's the sound we are recreating in Serum today. If you like it, make sure to subscribe, press the notification bell so you see all of our videos, and hit like on the video. What's up guys, this is Tassion with Cymatics, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to remake the intro from the song Faded by ZHU. So first I'm going to play you the original, and then I'm going to show you the patches we made. So you can hear that there's a bassline and a pluck on top. We've recreated both, so this is going to be a two-part video. First we're going to do the pluck, and then we're going to do the bassline. So here's the pluck. And here's the bassline. So both together it sounds a little something like this. As always, I definitely recommend you go to the description and download the MIDI and the presets and follow along with me, because it's really going to help you out. If you're just watching this video, you're definitely going to learn a little bit, but you don't learn as much as if you're actually doing it. So definitely recommend downloading that and following with me. First, I'm going to turn off everything else, and I am going to hit Command-Shift-T to make a new MIDI track and open up Serum. And then I am going to copy this MIDI down below so we have the exact same pattern. All right, so right now you should be hearing. So yeah, it doesn't sound anything like it, so we got a lot of work to do. So let's open up Serum. And for this patch, we are going to be using the sub oscillator, oscillator A, and oscillator B. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to make this sub oscillator a square wave. And we're going to bump this up 2 octaves. So you should be hearing. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to oscillator A and select the wavetable matrix Y64. And we're going to bump this up 2 octaves. So you should be hearing. And for oscillator B, we are going to select the wavetable saw rounded and also bump that up 2 octaves. All right. And what we're also going to do, let's go back to oscillator A. We're also going to take this down 3 cents for the fine tuning, just because later on we're going to put a vibrato on this. And sometimes when you put a vibrato on something, it kind of makes the note a little like sharper, a little more high pitched than normal. So we're just going to do that to counter the vibrato. And while we're here, let's take this level down to around 11 o'clock. And we'll take oscillator B's level to around 12 o'clock. So we're just kind of evening out these volumes, so you should be hearing. So for oscillator A, we're going to take the wavetable position to around 1 o'clock. And this is just basically cycling through the wavetable. So you can see if you click on this, you can go from 2D mode to 3D mode. So we're just going to move it around to right around here. And oscillator B's wavetable position is going to stay the same. Also, for our warp mode, right here, we are going to select PWM, which stands for Pulse Width Modulation. And we are also going to select that for oscillator B. So now you should be hearing. So later, we're actually going to go in, and for our envelopes, we're going to start modulating these things. But so that's it for all the oscillators. So now would actually be a great time to go into the envelopes and start modulating. So envelope 1 controls the movement of all the oscillators, like the volume. So we're going to leave the attack where it is. We're going to set the decay to 725. Also, if you saw, I am double clicking and typing in exactly what I want rather than dragging, just so you can get more precise. So to do that, you have to go into global and make sure that this button is selected. So I'm going to click that, and I don't know if you noticed, but this right here, this save button went from light gray to like white. That's because I changed something. You can actually go in and hit save, and that'll save your preferences. So you can go in and double click for typable values every time. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to 725 right there, and I'm going to take this sustain and bring it all the way down. So now you should be hearing. All right. And while we're on envelope 1, this is actually a really cool part of this patch, is if you hear in the original, the decay like varies, and it has to do with the velocity. So you can see the velocity right down here, how when these notes get really low, the decay, it kind of like closes the note down. So you hear how this note right here was like very short and kind of like filtered out. So we're going to do that right here with our velocity control. So this velocity right here, it will actually read the different notes. So you see how this thing is bouncing around? We're actually going to take this to the decay. And right now it's going unipolar, which is one way. We're going to hit Shift, Option, and click on it for it to go bipolar. So we're going to want to do it just like that. So that's really going to bring some things home later, because we have 5 things that envelope 1 is modulating. So with this velocity controlling the decay time of envelope 1, it is really going to change the timbre of the sound. All right, so next thing we're going to do is, while we're by the envelopes, we are going to make envelope 2. And this is just going to be a really small kind of shape. And we're just going to set this to the coarse pitch so we get a little descending pitch action going here. So we're going to drag the attack all the way down to 0, take the decay and type in 11 for 11 milliseconds, and drag the sustain all the way down. So it's literally going to be this blip, but that's all we really need. And while we're here, this is only going to be modulating one thing. So let's drag envelope 2 to the coarse pitch. Right now it's going bipolar. We only want it to go unipolar, so we're going to hit Shift, Option, and click for it to go unipolar, and we're going to leave it at 19. All right, and now we have one more shape to make, and that is LFO1. And we are going to make this a sine wave, and this is actually a really cool trick. If you hold Option and click this folder, you can actually cycle through the different LFO shapes. So it's a really quick way to do it. So we're going to click until we get this sine wave right there. And we are going to drag this onto the fine pitch. So let's drag this onto the fine. And right now it's going unipolar. We want it to go bipolar. So we're going to hold Shift, Option, and click. And we're going to drag this down till it says 10. Also, we're going to change this from BPM to hertz, and we're just going to type in 6 for 6,000 hertz. So we should be hearing. So you can hear small differences vibrato makes. Just makes the sound a little bit more interesting and less constant. So it just sounds like a little bit more natural. All right, so now we've made all of our shapes. Let's go ahead in and start modulating some of the things that we need. All right, so first we're going to take envelope 1 and put it on the wavetable position. And we're going to drag this range down until it says 22. And let's leave that about right there, so 22. Make sure the wavetable position is on 41. And then we're going to drag envelope 1 onto oscillator B's wavetable position and drag this down to 30. So now we should be hearing. So that's just giving the sound a little bit more movement and making it a tad more exciting. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on this filter. Make sure that oscillator A and B are running through the filter. We're going to select MG low 6, which is basically a more mellow curve than 12. We are going to set the cutoff to 245. And we are going to also make sure that key tracking is on, the filter key track. So whenever you play a different note, the filter will actually follow depending on what key you're on. So if you're on a really low key, it will go to a lower frequency. And if you're on a really high key, it will go to a higher frequency. So we're going to leave that on. Make sure this is at 245 because it just changed on me. And we're going to take envelope 1 and put it on the cutoff and make sure that this range is to 100. It's all the way up. So what's cool about this is now that we have the filter is that this velocity is changing the decay time. So this filter is closing and opening at different rates. More so, it's closing at a different rate. Whenever the velocity is lower, it's closing a lot quicker. All right, so that's everything for the oscillators. We're going to move on to the effects tab now. So first thing we're going to do is turn on a filter, and we are going to drag that to the top just so it's the first plugin in the effects chain. And we are going to bring up MG low 18. We are going to turn the cutoff to 88 Hertz. And we are going to drag envelope 1 onto that cutoff and drag it to 36. Drag the range to 36. So now you should be hearing. See, now we're getting really, really close. That really like took it from kind of sounding like it to really sounding like it. So the rest of these effects are just going to be kind of, you know, enhancing it small. But this filter right here is doing the most important job in my opinion. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to take the resonance and put it to 14%. And this is just, if we look at this filter right here, this resonance will kind of make a peak where the filter starts to curve down. And this can give you like a valley type of sound. So we're just going to bring the resonance up a little bit. And we're also going to take this fat knob up to 20%. And this fat knob, I'm not sure exactly what it does, but it just seems to make the sound a little bit warmer, and it beefs up the lows and the mids. Ever since I started doing these videos, I've been using this fat knob a lot. Like, I mean, on every sound, I will just pump this up because I really like my sounds to be warm. So I've noticed that this knob really does a good job at doing that. So that's it for the filter. So let's listen to this fat knob. I'm going to play around with this just so you can hear it because it's kind of a mystery what it does, but to me, it just sounds like it's beefing the sound up. So I really like that a lot. So I'm going to leave that on 20. And now it's time to go to our next effect. So we're going to select hyper/dimension. And we are going to leave the mix where it is, and we're going to bring this detune up and the rate up. So basically you can hear that the sound just got a little bit wider, and this unison being at 4 and this mix being up, it almost like adds 4 voices. You know, it's almost like detuning one of your oscillators, but it's doing it for the entire patch. So it's a cool little effect. So we'll leave it right around there. And then we're also going to take this dimension down, the size, and we're going to turn the mix to about right there. And what this is doing is this is adding a small delay between the left and the right speaker. So that sounds really good right there. One thing I forgot to add is I've just been noticing after we've been adding more volume and a few filters, the sound seems to cut off very like harsh. You can hear like a little popping sound when the notes end. Specifically on those last two. And that's because I totally forgot to turn the release up. So we're going to turn this release of envelope 1 to around 435. And we're also going to turn the mono and legato up because these notes tend to overlap because of the release. So that sounds a lot smoother. So for our next effect, we're going to turn on the chorus, and we'll drag that right up here. And we're going to take this first delay and type in 12.5, and this second delay and make it 9.4. So now you should be hearing. So this is making the sound wider, and it's giving 2 very small delays. And this is good for really just like adding a little texture and like thickness to a sound. So then we're going to play with this depth. We're going to take this depth down to 3. It definitely makes the delay not as noticeable, and that's kind of what we wanted to do. And then we are going to take this feedback and turn it to 57. And then we're also going to take this low pass filter and turn it all the way up. And this is still a little bit much, so we're going to tame this mix down to around 33. So like I said, this filter up here is doing most of the work. So everything after this is really just going to be enhancing the sound slightly. And that's really the name of the game when you're adding effects, is you don't want to do a ton of stuff all at once because you'll just tend to like clutter the sound and make it sort of messy. But let's listen to this real quick without the chorus. It's just adding a tiny bit of width and delay. It's very, very subtle, but it does make the sound a little bit nicer. So all these little subtleties are going to add up at the end. So the next thing we're going to add is an EQ. We're going to drag this to the top. And we are going to make this a low cut. And we are going to take this Q down to around 49, just below 50, just because we don't want a huge bump right there. So we'll go 49. And we're going to take this to 485. So this is going to be low cutting a lot. But remember, there's going to be a bass line underneath this, so we really don't need a ton of these low frequencies. So this is going to make some more room for that bass line. Next thing we're going to do is add a little bit of highs. So we're going to leave this EQ frequency right here at 2041. We're going to take this Q down to 20% because, again, if this Q is up and we start boosting this, it's a very unnatural curve. So we're going to take this down to 20, so it's more of a slow rise. And we're going to take this gain to 10.7. So now you should be hearing. So it sounds a lot better with that added high end. Next thing we're going to add is a compressor. So this compressor is just going to tame some of those peaks because this is a very like plucky sound. All right, so we're going to take this threshold to negative 14.5. We're going to leave the ratio at 4. We're also going to leave the attack at 90. But we're going to take this release down to 41.5. Now these are all, very subtle changes. And then after that, we are going to pump the gain up to 13.5. So I'm going to turn this master down and bring it back in because that's a lot of gain to make up. All right, yeah, I just never know how loud it's going to be. I don't want to blow yours or my ears out. So the next thing we're going to add is a delay. We'll drag this up here. We're going to take the feedback and set it to 24. Because we don't want a ton of feedback. We're going to leave the left at a quarter note, and we're going to turn the right to an eighth note. So now you should be hearing. Sounding very cool. Then this is a little filter right here. So we're going to take this to 7385, and we are going to drag this up to 2.7. So this is basically going to be cutting out the lows that are being delayed. So you should hear. And then we're just going to take this dry wet up to 40% because we want a little bit more of that delay in there. Last thing we're going to add is a reverb. And we're going to take this size to, we're going to leave it around 35. We'll take the decay to 6.2 seconds, so it's a long decay. And we're going to bring this low cut up to 64%. So we're cutting a lot of the lows here. So let's listen to that. So let's listen to this low cut. Bring it down a little bit. Hear all that like really low background stuff, so we want to clear that out because that's getting kind of muddy. Also, it sounds like this sound is clipping a little bit, so we're going to turn this down. We're going to take the high cut down to 14 because we don't want to be cutting any of those highs because this sound is predominantly high end. We're going to turn the spin all the way up, and we're going to leave the spin depth right there at 20. And then we're just going to put this mix up a little bit higher, so right around there. That is the general idea of how to make that timbre sound. So that's it for the pluck. Let's move on to the bass line. So just like the pluck, we are going to hit Command-Shift-T to make a new MIDI track, and we are going to open up Serum. And then we are going to drag this MIDI down so we have the exact same MIDI patch. So this is what we should be hearing. All right, so for this patch, we are going to be using the sub oscillator, oscillator A, and oscillator B, not the noise oscillator. So let's start with the sub. We're going to turn the sub oscillator on, select direct out. That is going to mean that this sub oscillator is going to bypass all the effects and the filters. So we're going to get that nice clean sub. And again, this is important because if we have any sort of saturation in these effects, the bass is going to kind of lose its clean quality. So we're going to hit direct out to prevent that. All right, so we're going to select the rounded rectangle sub oscillator shape. And this is kind of like a sine, but it's like a rounded square, so it gives you a little bit more overtones. And we're going to drop this down an octave. So now we should be hearing. So that's just adding like some nice warm thickness to it. So oscillator A, we are going to select the wavetable shape saw rounded, and we're going to drop that down an octave. That's sounding really deep. And then for oscillator B, we're going to turn that on, and we're going to select saw rounded to square, and we're going to leave this octave where it is. All right. So back to oscillator A, we are going to select the unison and drag it up to 3. And we're also going to bring the detune down a little bit to right around there. And basically what this is doing is this is taking those out of tune voices and moving them closer to the in tune voice. And you can see that in this like diagram here. So we'll drag that to around 14. We're going to take the blend all the way up, which is making the out of tune voices a little bit louder than the perfectly in tune voice. We're going to take the wavetable's position and put it to 5. So yeah, you can hear with that unison being up, the synth gets a little bit wider because these 3 different voices, since they're out of tune from each other, and we have a low pitched bass, they're phasing each other out at certain parts. So that's why it's kind of sounding like it's bouncing around your headphones a little bit or your speakers. It's just sounding nice and wide. Then for oscillator A's warp mode, we are going to select FM from B and take this to 45. And basically what this is doing is this is taking oscillator B and it is feeding through oscillator A. So now you should be hearing. And it's important to note that often with FMing from B, it's very useful to use simple wavetables and not like very cluttered wavetables, because then it might just sound like white noise a little bit. It'll just get really crunchy really fast. All right, then we're going to take the wavetable position of oscillator B and put it to 10. So now we should be hearing. And we're actually going to bring these levels down so we're not clipping too early. So we'll take that to around oscillator A to around right there. And then we're going to make oscillator B a little bit lower than oscillator A. So now that we have our oscillator squared away, let's get into making our envelope. We're only going to have one envelope for this entire patch, and this is going to be automating 4 things. So not super complex, but let's start with the attack. We're going to take the attack up to 24 milliseconds, and this is basically going to take away any clickiness that happens. We're going to take this release up to 317. All right, and then we're going to take this decay, and we're going to drop this down to 586. And this is not going to do anything because the sustain is at 0. So the decay will only come into effect when the sustain is at something else. So we're going to take this sustain to around like -17. So now it's this nice smooth kind of like pluck. All right, so let's start modulating things. So envelope 1, like I said, is going to be modulating 4 things. And 2 of those things we can modulate right off the bat, and that being the FM from B. And we will take that to around 12. So it's kind of hitting, or we'll take it to around like 5 or 6, just so it's kind of passing that midway point a little bit. And then we are going to put this on the wavetable position of oscillator B and drag that to around 31. So that's sounding really good. And now that everything is done for the sub, the oscillator A and oscillator B, let's quick turn on mono and legato, and we'll bump the portamento up a little bit. Just because since this is a one-shot note, this is a bass note, we don't want these sounds to overlap, especially if this release is turned up. So if we have this release turned up high, it might bleed into the next note being played, and that's going to cause a hell of a lot of issues. So we are going to take this and put it on mono, so only one note can be played at a time. So if this note is ringing out, the time the next note hits, that note will completely end. And this portamento will just cause a glide. All right, so now that that's all done, let's go to our filter. We're going to turn on the filter and select A and B, so both of these oscillators are going through the filter. And we're going to select German low pass. So we're going to go down to miscellaneous and go to German low pass. And this is really going to tame our sound. So we're going to take this cutoff and go to 171 Hertz. And we're going to drag envelope 1 onto this. Oh, I moved it. 171. We're going to drag envelope 1 and go to 11. So now you should be hearing. Now that sounds a lot better than, because you don't want those high end, in there for this sort of like deep house. So we're also going to drag this resonance up to 46%. So now there's this little peak there. And it's kind of giving it like a whoa, 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 whoa. So it's kind of giving it like a nice little valley sound. And we're going to take this drive and put it at 20. And this will be like overdriving the filter a little bit. So it'll add a little bit of harmonics. It might compress it a little bit. And that is everything we need to do for the oscillator tab. So now it's time to move on to the effects. So for our first effect, we are going to put on hyper and dimension. And we are going to take this rate and take it up. It is at 16%. We're going to leave it at 16. We're going to leave this at 25. And we're going to take this mix down to 15. So now we should be hearing. And this is really important. This is another reason why this direct out should be on, is because this is like a stereo imager, and we're going to make this stereo image a little bit wider, but we don't want that to interfere with this sub, because sub should always be like mono. So you don't want that to happen, or it could just cause some weird phasing issues. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the dimension size down to 20 and the mix up to 15. And this will just be creating a small delay between the left and right speaker, which will give it a sort of bigger vibe. So you'll notice if I turn this off, everything really sounds right down the middle, but when I turn it on, it sounds wider and more interesting. All right, and our next effect is actually going to go before the hyper dimension. So like I was saying, how the stereo imaging can almost mess up those sub-frequencies, we're going to prevent that here with a low cut. And this is, again, another reason why this direct out should be on. Because if it wasn't, we would be low cutting the sub and there would be no sub. So let's take this Q down to 45 because we want it to be a more mellow curve. And we're going to take this up to 236. So now this sound is essentially cut at 236, and all of this stereo imaging taking place will be only affecting all the other frequencies. So we've successfully kind of like split this away from the sub, so there shouldn't be any phasing issues. Next effect we're going to add is distortion, and we're going to take this down to asym. And then we're also going to take this filter and select pre and drag it all the way up to high pass, and take this frequency and drag it down to 80 and make the Q 0.1. So now we should be hearing. So that is just going to add a little bit of harmonics. And next we are going to take the drive and bump it up to 60. But that's kind of a little much, so we're going to take the mix and take it down to 60 as well. So again, this is just adding some harmonics and kind of beefing up the sound a little bit so it'll stand out overall in the mix. Next thing we're going to add is a reverb, and we are going to select plate mode. So now you should be hearing. We're going to take this size and bring it down a little bit to 33 and take this pre-delay down to 3 because we don't want a lot of delay before the reverb comes into effect. Next thing we're going to do is take this low cut and bring it to 14% and the high cut to 87. So this is going to be cutting most of those highs. Next thing we're going to do is take the damp up to 78, the width up to 40, and we're actually going to pull this mix down a little bit to 6. So it is barely there, but it is there, you know? It's just adding a little bit of depth, so it's not just like so flat, you know, so two-dimensional. And the last effect we're going to add is filter, and we're going to select add bass. So we're going to take this cutoff and put it at 1206. And we're going to take envelope 1 and drag it on and drag this to -25. And that is the last modulation we will be doing for this sound. And this is sort of countering this distortion a little bit and adding a bit of that bass back, but it's still making the sound like that distortion's still necessary to make the sound more audible kind of on every sound system and through the mix. We're going to leave the resonance all the way down. We're going to take the drive up to 8, so it's just overdriving the filter a little bit. And we're going to put this through at 34. And that is it. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I know this is a longer one, but we successfully remade 2 different sounds, 2 different timbred sounds, and they go together great. We have the preset and MIDI download in the description. So if you haven't already done so, definitely download those, and I hope you followed along with us. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot. I'm Tassione, and this is Cymatics.